All right, for this next section, I want you to think about your brain sitting inside your skull. Okay, so first of all, it's inside this big bone thing, and the brain is kind of soft and smushy, so it's going to need some protection. So the meninges, or the meningeal layers, are the layers that protect the skull, or the brain, from the skull, but also keep the brain packaged nice and tight. Now, we've talked about some other structures in the body that are held together by connective tissues and things. The brain is also held together and packaged inside little sections. All right, I want you to visualize the last time you bought electronics, okay, like maybe a cell phone, okay, and it comes in this little box. The box is perfectly fitted to the little cell phone and all of the stuff that comes with it. So you open up the box, and there's little folded cardboard pieces making all these little spaces, and tucked inside all of those little spaces are the phone, which has a little plastic package on top of that, and then the charging cable, which is wrapped in another little piece of plastic and is inside a little like fold, and then the instruction book, and everything is packed in nice and tight, and God help you if you need to return it, you will never get it back into that box. The meninges are those little folds of cardboard and plastic holding the brain in place. Okay, got that picture in your head? All right, so now let's talk about them. So this is a cross section showing through the scalp. So we've got the bone, the periosteum is a connective tissue layer around bone, and then the skin of the scalp. And on the bottom side, the deep side, the periosteum and another layer called the meningeal layer of connective tissue fuse together to form what we call the Dura Mater. Dura means tough, so the Dura Mater is the tough mother. Okay, mater means mother. So this is a really, really tough layer, and if you watch the video of me dissecting the sheep brain, you'll see how tough this Dura Mater is. It's incredibly strong. It's like the pericardium. It's that tough and strong. It's made out of dense, irregular connective tissue. And then most of the time, these two layers are fused together, but not always. In a few places, you can see here, the two layers of the Dura Mater are separated, and that creates a little space inside, which is called a sinus. And it's specifically a sinus that's filled with venous blood, deoxygenated blood. So this, because it's part of the Dura Mater, because it's venous and because it's a sinus, it's called a dural venous sinus. Okay, there are several dural venous sinuses in and around the brain, and we will talk about them, and yes, you do need to know them. So these two layers together are the Dura Mater. And I realize now that this image shifted. Hang on, I'm not apparently gonna do that. There we go. All right, I'm gonna shift this image down. This is gonna make me crazy. There we go, that's better. Nothing but the most professional stuff here. There we go. Now my arrows are pointing to the right thing. Okay, sorry about that. All right, now there is a space, not really, between the Dura Mater and the bone. This is called a potential space. That is also the epidural space. There is a subdural space under the Dura Mater. It is also a potential space. What in the world am I talking about? All right. Take your mind to the grocery store. Walk into the produce section. You're going to grab some broccoli or maybe some apples, and you grab one of those flimsy little plastic bags off the roll. Okay? Now, there is a potential space within those layers of plastic. Okay? But right now, the two layers are stuck so closely together with static electricity that you can't get to the space. Okay? But you know it's there, right? Because it's a plastic bag on a roll. So you got to do the little thing where you rub your hands back and forth a few times to like get the space to show up. Okay? All right. Same deal around your brain, except we never want this space to be a real space. Okay? So in this area, the periosteum is not held to the bone like it normally is. And so it is possible for fluid to build up around the dura mater, between the dura mater and the bone. Okay? But under normal circumstances, the dura mater and the bone sit right next to each other and there's no space between them. But it could be, so it's a potential space, like the inside of the plastic bag at the grocery store. Okay? Same with the subdural space. And here they show it as an actual space, but it's actually not. Okay? But if the dura mater and the next layer, the arachnoid mater, don't stay together, then fluid could build up between those two, and the subdural space then becomes a real space. Okay? This is important because we're going to have these same meningeal layers around the spinal cord, and around the spinal cord, the epidural space is a real thing, and it's actually filled with fat and other things. So just keep that in mind. Around the brain, not a real thing, but because we have the same meninges and the space, it could be. Now, if you get a really hard blow on the head and it breaks up one of these blood vessels here, then you could have what we call a subdural hematoma, which is a bruise. A hematoma is a bruise, a buildup of blood, and that would be blood in the subdural space. Get it now? Yeah, you don't want one of those. Don't get one of those. Okay, so we have the dura mater. That's the most superficial and the toughest of the layers. The next layer is called the arachnoid mater, and it's this pink little layer right here. And under it is the subarachnoid space, which is held open by arachnoid trabeculae. Okay, now arachnoid means like a spider. So the reason it's called the spider mother, the arachnoid mater, is because of these little trabeculae, which are these little bands of connective tissue, collagen and elastic fibers, that hold open this subarachnoid space, and they kind of look like spider webs. Hence arachnoid mater. Okay, so dura mater, arachnoid mater, and then under that subarachnoid space held open by arachnoid trabeculae. Trabeculae means little beams. And then finally, the deepest layer is called the Pia Mater. Pia means tender, so this is the tender mother. And the Pia Mater is this pink layer right here, and it's stuck to the cerebral cortex. Okay, it's actually stuck to the neurons that make up the cerebral cortex. It is areolar connective tissue, so it's really thin, but it just kind of holds the brain in shape. Okay, holds it together. It's that, really thin layer of plastic around your phone. Okay, sticks to the brain. The lots and lots of blood vessels run, actually not through the Pia Mater, but right above it through that subarachnoid space. Okay, so those are the meninges. Now, let's go back to the dura mater and let's talk more about these venous sinuses. So, the dura mater folds and extends into the spaces between the different parts of the brain. So you remember we have the cerebrum, and then under it the cerebellum, and then the cerebellum is not really connected to the brainstem. So in all of these little spaces, we're going to have these folds of dura mater that extend into those spaces to keep the parts of the brain from moving against each other and damaging each other, to keep them all in place and, not so they don't shift when you're jumping up and down. Enjoy. So the Falx Cerebri is this extension of the dura mater that extends down into the longitudinal fissure between the two cerebral hemispheres. So cerebri, meaning between the cerebrum, this one is the falx, that's division, cerebri, meaning of the cerebrum. This is the largest of the dura septa, and it contains a couple sinuses. You don't need to know these things. You don't know them yet. The superior sagittal sinus is here. It goes along the top of the falx cerebri. Okay, and then the inferior sagittal sinus goes here along the bottom of the falx cerebri. Okay, both of those are going to receive venous blood and then drain out through the internal jugular veins. This is the view from the back So you can see this superior sagittal sinus, obviously on the sagittal plane. Ta-da! All right, now there is also a falx cerebelli, but it's much smaller because the division between the two hemispheres of the cerebellum is much smaller. It also has a sinus in it, which is called the occipital sinus because it goes down the middle of the occipital bone. There is also this fold here, which goes in from here. Okay, it goes transversely or horizontally between the cerebellum and the cerebrum, and it's called the tentorium cerebelli, which literally means tent over the cerebellum. Okay, so that's this layer here. Around the sides of that, it has two transverse sinuses, one going on either side. Okay, and that's that. So the tentorium cerebelli is here, and where it meets the dura mater around the edge of the skull, it has these transverse sinuses. Okay. Here at the front, there is a tentorial notch. Oh, sorry, here, yeah, where the brainstem goes through. And then the last one is this little tiny one right here called the diaphragm ocelli. Now, diaphragm means a division or a cap of some sort. And sella refers to this little pocket of bone, which is called the sella turcica. Oh, that's spelled wrong. That's supposed to be turcica. There we go. There we go. Oh, usually I don't make this many mistakes. Anyway, so the sella turcica is this little pocket. The pituitary gland sits in that little pocket, and the diaphragm ocelli sits over it. Now, Dura Mater also goes around the pituitary gland here. Okay, so all this layer is Dura Mater. So the pituitary is surrounded by Dura Mater, with the diaphragm ocelli being the thing that goes over the top, and then there's a little hole in it for the infundibulum, which is the little connection between the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. Okay, so we have the falx cerebri, the falx cerebelli, tentorium cerebelli, and then the diaphragm ocelli, which I always like to say in a baby voice because it's so cute. It's just a little tiny one. Okay, and then for the sinuses, we have the superior sagittal sinus, the inferior sagittal sinus, transverse sinuses, occipital sinus, and then here in the back, where all four of those come together, we have the confluence of sinuses. Confluence means a bunch of them together. Oh, and then there's the straight sinus as well. I always forget to mention that one. Okay, so here we go. This is what it looks like in a cadaver. You can see this falx cerebri very clearly. In this one, the veins have been injected with a blue latex dye, so we can see where these venous sinuses are. And then here you can see the tentorium cerebelli there and the diaphragm ocelli right there. Okay, and that's that section. Up next, we're going to talk about the ventricles and the cerebrospinal fluid.